Hello, everyone, and welcome to the panel on Zero Hunger today. My name is Robin Barr. I'll be the moderator. I hope you all have been able to figure out the HOVA app and find your way here. And we're very glad to have you. I hope your morning is going well. So this morning, I'm really excited to be part of this discussion because it's about food. And we all know that food is one of the most fundamental human needs that we all share, right up there with air and water. Yet so much of the world's population is food insecure. The World Food Programme has labeled 2022 as a year of unprecedented hunger and estimates that as many as 828 million people go to bed hungry every night around the world. Part of that, 49 million people in 49 countries are teetering on the edge of famine. So we hear these big headlines about how the war in Ukraine is disrupting wheat supply chains and making fertilizer more expensive, and how this can lead to food prices going up by 20%, or how climate change is making the crop seasons unpredictable and resulting in extreme weather events. It can feel very overwhelming, but we're pleased today to have people who are really working on the front lines of how to tackle the issues and the root causes of food insecurity around the world. And I'm so excited to hear from them because they're people who work on this, think deeply about this, and can really bring us, I hope some hope and some inspiration for what the solutions might look like. So with that, I'm going to briefly introduce our distinguished panelists. I'd like to start with Irene Naikaali. She is the head of programs at the Hunger Project in Uganda. We also have Jedidah Ganira. She is the Livelihoods and Resilience Advisor at World Vision Kenya. And Anjali Makhija, who is the CEO and trustee of Sehgal Foundation in India. Welcome to you all. I'm so excited to learn more from you today. Maybe to start, it would be great to hear from each of you if you could briefly describe to us what the current situation is with regard to food security in the countries where you work. What are the main factors that might be preventing food security with the countries and the regions that you're working in? And Irene, I'd like to invite you to go first. Tell us, what are you seeing in Uganda with the communities where you're currently working?
Thank you, Robin, and thank you everyone who has joined us at this conference. Yeah, in Uganda, the statistics reveal that about 27.7% of Ugandans are food insecure. But what does this really mean? For a person who has visited Uganda, you may think that these statistics are not actually correct, because depending on which part of the country you visited, if you come to Kampala, which is the capital city, usually you'll be welcomed by, a lot of food. You go to a restaurant, they're serving really high volumes of food. And so somebody may actually wonder that, is this really correct? The fact of the matter is we have issues when it comes to food distribution or food availability in different parts of the country. There are some parts of the country that are really concentrated and have really plenty. The production is so high and there's actually a lot of wastage, while some regions of the country are not receiving enough of what they really need to have. And some of the factors really contributing to this are, the climatic conditions, the cultivation methods that are being used. There's been a lot of emphasis on using of chemicals. So some regions of the country have actually experiencing a lot of soil depletion. The nutrients in the soils, the biodiversity is really being affected. And so the production levels are going low. You look at also, we have issues of food prices. Some communities are not able to actually afford the food. We've just come out of the lockdown. Uganda was one of the countries that experienced the longest lockdown. We were in the lockdown for 2 years, which means that people's livelihoods were highly affected. So the people's purchasing power was affected. So people weren't able to purchase food. And of course, also coupled with all the increase in the fuel prices because of the global conflicts that are going on. So access to food is actually a challenge to so many people, even those within that city center. So, and then we also have issues of malnutrition. In Uganda, a third of the children in Uganda are actually malnourished. And the problem is majorly because there's a lot of emphasis on cultivation for energy use versus cultivation for nutritional use. So few communities are actually very sensitive about the whole concept of nutrition sensitive agriculture. It's about produce food, have enough food to eat. So the quality of food that is produced and feeding the communities, the households, is actually not nutritious enough. And we've seen a lot of this impact amongst the children. And of course, this all goes back to the whole issue of the sensitization, the education, and where the emphasis is being put, especially from the policy perspective. What is the emphasis is so much on production to feed the growing population. But what exactly, if we had unpacked the production, we're not looking at the issues of nutrition. So micronutrients, are really becoming a very huge challenge, which is causing a lot of malnutrition in the country. And surprisingly, regions which have a lot of production, especially like the western part of the country, actually the areas which have the highest cases of malnutrition. And of course, it points back to the issue of the knowledge bit and the emphasis on, production for energy use. And of course, when you look at also the issues of stability, most of these households are so worried about their potential to be able to sustain food, the food availability in their homes, food security in their homes. Many of them, because of these issues, they have to battle, with the poverty levels, they have so many demands around them, and then the pressures to meet the daily, their daily demands. So many of them find that having enough to store, enough food that can take them through the season or through the year is a challenge. And then this also points us to one of the proverbs that I read about. It's a Zimbabwean proverb that says that you can never tell an angry child that I gave you food yesterday. So food is a necessity, and communities are continuing to suffer the effect of, that uncertainty of not being able to provide for their families. So that is generally the situation in the country, despite Uganda being well known as the food basket of the East African region, or the food basket of Africa. But unpack that, the reality is actually different.
Wow, thank you so much for helping us understand how those overlapping issues are playing out. I'd like to take us now to India and invite Anjali Makhija to please tell us, what are you seeing in the regions in India where you're currently working?
Thank you so much, Robin, and very interesting to hear about Uganda. Now in India, there is a phase pre-Green Revolution and post-Green Revolution. So prior to 1950, we had a lot of difficulty in availability of food. And then the Green Revolution came and the productivity increased. But since 1990s again, due to climate change and, the other factors, crop productivity has been increasing. And now we are kind of trying to match up the productivity with the population, with the increasing population in India. India is grappling with increasing number of, increasing population. So we are still doing okay with it. But in India also, the problem is on equitable distribution and access. The mechanism is there, but how to access, the lack of information is there among the communities. And I will speak about it in a minute. Just a few statistics in terms of the Indian scenario. In the Global Food Security Index, India ranks 75th out of the 113 countries, And according to UN, in India, there are 195 million undernourished people in India. And 45% of children in India are undernourished. So even though the quantity is there, but in terms of nourishment, in terms of protein intake, iron deficiency, especially among women and children, adolescent girls. So 78% of food security in our country is ensured by wheat and rice. But to meet the protein requirements, other initiatives are required. And the government is working on pulse production program under the National Food Security Mission. And recently, in response to a proposal from India, the UN has designated 2023 as the year of millets. Millets was traditionally grown in India, but it kind of lost its charms when, production of wheat increased. But now it's back to in the category of superfoods, and, it is more nutritional. So the Indians are, getting sensitized to, the millets consumption. So we are making efforts to fill that gap between production and population, and gradually even the government is working on doubling farmers' income, increasing productivity. A lot of efforts are going. So this is a general scenario, but the main factors preventing the food security, I would focus on 3 A's: availability, access, and affordability. So availability in terms of, as I said, narrowing the gap between food production and population growth. And there are still a large number of small and marginalized farmers who use outdated technologies and, overuse of fertilizer. There is lack of information. The land size is decreasing over a period of time. And there are challenges to access to credit, because these are very poor farmers in the small and marginalized areas and villages. The second problem is access. Now, in India, we have National Food Security Act 2013, where wheat and rice grains are distributed at subsidized rates to the poorest sections of the communities. But again, the communities, many times they lack the information about various provisions. We have a public distribution system which provides subsidized food to people. We have integrated child development services which provides nutrition to children and lactating mothers, where then we have midday meal program in the school, which is one of the largest programs to provide nutrition to school-going children. But many times, the families, they do not know what is the, eligibility of these systems, what are they eligible to. So a lot of information gap is there, which needs to be filled up. That is something which even the civil societies and the government, both in collaboration, are trying to work on. And then in terms of access, there are, of course, problems of storage facilities because of humidity and pests in India, so a lot of crop goes waste. So that is another challenge. And the last point is on affordability, where the farmers, again, we need to, again, increase the income of both the agricultural communities and non-agricultural communities, expanding the scope of income of the poor to so that they can afford. And one point which is just across all programs is the participation of women, which is grossly underrated. Women work in the field for long hours and they are not even recognized as farmers. So the participation of women, both in decision-making, in access, in availability, that is a major gap which needs to be filled. Yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you for that overview. I like that summary: availability, access, and affordability. That's a good way to remember it. And I hear this issue of women not being recognized as farmers all over the world.
Yes.
And yet, so often women are the main ones growing the crops. So I think that unfortunately, that's not only a problem in India.
Yes.
But I'd like to hear more about what's happening in Kenya as well. So we have with us Jedidah Ganira. Please, what are you seeing currently? What's the situation in Kenya? What are some of the main factors that you're facing there?
Great, thank you so much, Robin. And let me start by saying that Kenya is actually currently experiencing one of the worst droughts in the recent decades. And actually just today, the Kenya National Drought Management Authority reported that the drought situation has worsened in 23 arid and semi-arid counties out of our 47 counties. And actually now this has actually increased the risk of acute malnutrition and also the urgency for humanitarian assistance. And actually, one of the key impacts that is really standing out because of the situation that we are in is that now we have a very high number of Kenyans in those areas that are standing at malnutrition, acute malnutrition. Actually, the statistics is 4.3 million Kenyans in these areas actually are faced with acute malnutrition. And we have 942 cases of children 6 to 59 faced by acute malnutrition, as well as 134,000 pregnant and lactating women also acutely malnutrition and currently undergoing treatment. And some of the key factors that are contributing to this situation that we are in. Before I go to that, I think because of this, now we are in a crisis mode. In a way, we have been working with different partners and stakeholders to respond to this situation as development partners and also the government, which has come to support. We are working as a team to basically provide the food, bring cash transfers, and do as much as we can to basically save lives. And one of the key contributor to the situation that we are in is a consistent failed rain. We are actually in our fourth consecutive failed rain season in this part of the areas. And majority of the livestock have already died. There is no food, of course, in the farms. And so people are just left to depend on external aid that is coming along. Apart from this rain situation, I think one of the things that I want to highlight is that 80% of agriculture production in Kenya is dependent on rain-fed agriculture. And this poses a challenge in the state that we are in when rain is not there. So what happens? The production is, of course, affected. And looking at the number of farmers that do production in Kenya, actually 80% of farmers in this country are small-scale farmers, which are faced by situations that my colleague from India and also Uganda has mentioned. They use rudimentary technologies, and inputs that do not give them a maximum production. And actually for our case, our average farmer age is 59 years of age, compared to over 80% youth population in Kenya. So there is a very big disparity in terms of the ages for production work. And so there is minimal food production and, of course, low use of technology. Other factors, of course, include finances, because you need finances to be able to access inputs, and also technology, of course, because we are looking at new technologies, and given the age set that we are looking at are a little bit rigid to taking new innovations and new technologies. And of course, that also results to information access. There is low access in terms of production, new technologies. So information on production is also another challenge that is affecting the production, which is in turn affects the food security situation. My colleagues have also agreed on the factor that there is uneven food distribution across the country. And in Kenya, we have very few highlands which produce majority of the food. And right now, I think it was just last week when one of the farmers was saying that he's stuck with a lot of maize in his farm. And yet there are people across the other side of the country who are dying of hunger. And you know, the issues around transportation, infrastructure, and the government incentives around that is also a challenge that is also affecting the food distribution. Of course, the economic situation because of the COVID-19, there was a lot of layoffs, businesses were affected, and this has resulted to escalating food prices. And my colleague from Uganda also mentioned that there is a lot of people within the urban setups actually who are sleeping hungry. And we actually have programs that are targeting people within town setup, because most of them are low-level workers who are working in factories. They shut down and they are left without food to provide within these areas. And lastly, I think I'll talk about inadequate policies and strategies by the government. I think Kenya is one of the greatest countries that are signed to majority of the protocols and policies that support food security production. But one of the challenges that we have is unrationalized resource allocation in terms of finances. We have a two-tiered national governance system where we have the national government that comes up with policies, and then we have the county government level where the policy implementation takes place. And this is where resource allocation is taken. And the county government operates as autonomous body. So they make decisions depending on how they want. So you realize majority of the challenges facing food production are also being challenged. And finally, but not least, I think one of the other things that we are faced with that contributes really to this food insecurity in Kenya is the aspect of extension support. Sometimes in 2019, I carried out some study in 3 counties within the areas that we work in. And I found very shocking statistics that the farmer to extension officer to farmer numbers were going as high as 1 to over 6,000 farmers. So extension support is really a big challenge. And so we have resolved to working with farmers and promoting the farmer to farmer extension system that would help the farmers to learn from each other. And so, and of course, the climate change is also another issue. I think I've already talked about the changing climate that is already affecting our production aspects on the food security within the country. Otherwise, thank you so much, and looking forward to continue learning from the rest of the team members.
Yeah, thank you. I knew that there was a terrible drought going on in Kenya, but I had not realized how many years it had been happening. And I had the pleasure of living in Kenya a long time ago, 99 to 2000, and I was shocked when I saw pictures of Masai Mara just completely like a dust, you know, completely dried out. So I can only imagine the impacts that it's having on farmers. Thank you for helping us to picture that so clearly. Irene, I'd like to go back to you. I know that the Hunger Project has a community-led development approach to all of your work. Can you describe how this creates an advantage in addressing some of the root causes of the food crisis in Uganda?
Yeah, the Hunger Project employs a community-led development approach called the gender community. It's a gender community-led approach that we sometimes refer to as the epicenter strategy in the Hunger Project language. And this strategy puts communities at the forefront of ending their own hunger and poverty in a self-reliant manner. So we emphasize the point of the issue of self-reliance, because we believe that the person who is faced with the challenge actually has the solution. Solutions don't come from outside. So the solutions are within. And so our job as the Hunger Project is to mobilize these communities and empower them to actually be in the driver's seat and know that they can be able to be the champions of their own change. Oftentimes when we're in the communities and we ask, we pose a question and ask them, how many of you believe that you can be able to end hunger? We can be able to end hunger by 2030. The first immediate response we get is that no, it can never end, it can never happen. We've had hunger since time immemorial, and there's no way within the next 9 years or next 10 years remaining that we can be able to solve this issue. But then when we twist the question again and ask them, how many of you believe that within your own households, you're going to still be hungry by 2030? How many of you believe that you're not going to be able to provide for your children enough to eat, be food secure by 2030? They first pause around, keep quiet, and then they're like, no, I think I can do what it takes to ensure that my children have food or my family is food secure. So that alone, that question alone sets them it changes the whole tone of the discussion. And we make them realize that, you know what, ending hunger starts with you. And if you're able to end hunger in your own household, and then the neighbor also ends hunger, and the whole village ends their own hunger, and the community, eventually the nation, then we shall be able to end hunger within the remaining time, because the target we have is 2030. So as we are taking them, as we are working with the communities, we call them our community partners. Many other organizations tend to refer to them as beneficiaries, but in the Hunger Project, work, we refer to our communities as partners, because as we are promoting self-reliance, these are partners. We are just coming in to facilitate and, you know, empower them, but they are in the driver's seat. So they are our partners in the end of hunger. So in our approach, our community-led development approach, we follow a 5-step process. First, engaging and mobilizing these communities to walk through this journey of attaining self-reliance in ending their hunger. And the first process, the first stage that we take this community through is the change of mindset, because we believe that without changing the mindset, without changing that mental image of an individual, you're not able to do anything. So when we come in with interventions and just begin working around, but you've not really gone down to understand the person and connect with the person from the heart, for them to be able to realize that, you know, this is a problem and I have a role to play in this problem, and then helping them to develop this growth mindset. Because many of the people in Africa, many of the people in Uganda have been so much, because of the situation and the circumstances and the poverty, they've been so much kind of gotten stuck in that limited mindset where they believe we are vulnerable, we are poor, we're going to remain like that. Somebody has to come in and help. So we have to do a lot of work in creating that mindset shift. And we have a whole tool, a whole methodology curriculum, which we call the VCA methodology, that we take this community through to champion that change in the mindset. So when we get them to that point where they actually believe that I can be able to champion the change in my own household, in my community, in my country, to end hunger, then we are set on the road to building. And then that also takes us now to the question of leadership, because everything, we believe that everything rises and falls on leadership. And everybody in the communities, even a child, is a leader. Leadership doesn't come with title. These are things that we tell them to make them get into that seat, that driver's seat, to realize that they are the champions. So when we're working on the issue of leadership, we build their capacities to get to understand that as a household, to be able to become food secure, we need the leadership within these households. The different members within the community, within the household, they have to build their effective leadership. The husband, the wife, if you're having domestic violence in the home, there's no leadership. There's no harmony in the home. So you cannot work towards, you know, securing your own food security. Then we talk about leadership in the community. Leadership in the community. Who are the leaders that are going to mobilize? If you're not having effective leadership in the community, there are going to be a lot of cases of food theft. There are going to be a lot of cases of misuse of, you know, abuse of policies that are being set up by the government to support the system. So we need leaders, we need effective leaders to be able to mobilize the community, to be able to work with them. And when you look at the issue of, Jedidah talked about the issue of the extension workers, we have tried to address that issue by creating community volunteers who we call animators. So these animators are trained and given the capacity and the skills that the extension workers work at give the would give the communities in terms of, you know, improving their skills in cultivation and, you know, all the other stages of the food chain. So the animators, who are the people who are living together with the community members, they are chosen by the community, they are trained, and they're the ones now who go in and play that role of the extension. So in that way, we're able to solve that gap of, you know, the numbers of the extension workers versus the farmers. And then after we've worked on the leadership issue, of course, we mobilize the communities also and build an advocacy network where they can now actively and collectively raise their voices to, you know, to advocate, to lobby for policy changes. So we also have a tool that we adopted from World Vision called the CVA tool that builds the capacity of the communities to be able to, you know, to become the champions of their own changes. So we're having all these government policies that are hindering, you know, certain developments within the community, and communities feel that they're being suppressed. But we also tell them that it is your responsibility. Hunger Project is not going to come and engage the government on your behalf, but we can give you the push, but you have to be in the forefront. Because at the end of the day, Hunger Project is going to be here for about 5 years, and then we shall move on to the next community. But who is going to remain to be able to engage on those discussions with the government? So they have to be in the driver's seat. After we've worked on the leadership issue, we now set them into the vision setting, because we believe without a vision, you don't know where you're going. So vision setting is not only for the policymakers, for the government. We take it down to the level of the household. you as a husband or a wife, when you come together in a marriage to agree to start a family, definitely you know that this is responsibility for you. There's a dream that you have for your children. So within that dream, how many of you are able to write down that dream and place it in your sitting rooms or anywhere visible for your children, for your wife, for your husband? I mean, for all of you as a family to know that this is the direction where we're going. So how beautiful is it that within this vision, there is a component of, our household will never lack food. Any visitor who comes in this household will never lack. My neighbor would never lack food. So we have them come up with these beautiful visions, and we tell them that, when you have a vision, then you get focused. And whatever challenges that come along the way, you're able to kind of overcome them and remain stuck to your vision. So which calls in the issue of commitment. It is one thing that we always tell them that, it's one thing to have a vision, but also one thing working towards that vision. Many people come up with visions, but they're in their heads. They've not shared them with their family. They've not shared them with their communities. They've not shared them with their friends. So if you don't build this community support network by having this common vision as a community, as a village, as the district, you're not going to be able to solve the hunger issue. So we create that community support network, which starts from the family level and then eventually to the neighbors and all that, having that common vision and committing to the vision. So in commitment, definitely, this is where now we have them commit that we are actually going to have our own vision plans well documented. We are going to have our own, leadership selected within the communities, and we hold them accountable to lead us through this process. So that is the commitment bit. And all these discussions are taking place with our support and with the leadership that we've selected from the communities. Then
I love that. Yeah.
They now come up with action plans, the action plans. These action plans actually now get directing them onto their vision path that they're taking. And periodically we come in together and have reviews and say, okay, now for this particular community, because we cluster the communities, the community clusters are made up of about 30 to 50 villages clustered into one epicenter. And these agree to work together towards, having this common vision of having food secure households. So periodically we meet as Hunger Project staff together with the district leadership, because we work hand in hand with the local leadership. So we review the plans and then take it down even to the household level. These are the actions that you had said to accomplish within this year. What are you doing about this? So with their communities where we've actually had to influence a change, like the eastern part of the country, there's so much, there was a whole wave that came in where people were so much taken into sugarcane cultivation. You'd find a household not even sparing a smallest piece of land for them to grow food crop, but they are into sugarcane because Madivani Sugar Company has come and is promising them huge amounts of money. So the money issue drives them because they feel if we have the money, then we can go and buy the food. But then they forget that the entire village, the entire district is now growing sugarcane, which means the prices are going to go down. So at the end of the day, we are seeing a lot of starvation in these communities. And it's not because the area is infertile or the people don't have actually the knowledge to do what they're supposed to do, but the money is just, they're thinking about the money.
Yeah.
So we have to work a lot. Now that's why we influence the leadership and make them realize that, yes, the commercial bit is important, but first secure your food, first secure your household, so that there's food, that stability. So
I love that.
How the Hunger Project is coming in to support the communities. But at the end of it all, they are in the diverse seat. So we're able to point them to a certain situation that they are not actually taking keen attention to. And then we make them realize, there's something here. There is a gap here. So it is a process that we work with them for about 5 to 8 years, or even less, depending on how receptive the community is and willing, and their willingness to actually make these necessary changes. So as we transition through our journey, we reach a point where we declare these communities self-reliant. So when we declare them self-reliant, it doesn't mean that they've completely ended their own hunger, but they have the foundation pillars that are going to help them to continue on that journey and be able to achieve. So it's really a very beautiful process. We've transitioned over 50 epicenters or communities self-reliance, and they're already continuing on their journey, and they are the ones now influencing the others. So it's a very beautiful methodology that I feel so proud of as staff of the Hunger Project.
Absolutely. I feel inspired just listening to you talk about it, and I can imagine how it creates a movement of people who are, identifying and advocating for themselves. Because I could imagine if I was in a situation of hunger, I would feel like a victim. I would feel very, very weak, and what you're describing is a program that helps people feel strong and tackle those issues. So, and brave as well. So, and together, it's not just singular visions, but communities working together. I loved how you described the advocacy aspect of that. Thank you so much. I want to go now to Anjali and hear more about how you're working as well. Your work centers agriculture and food security, but also includes health education, climate change. Can you describe why you've taken a more holistic approach to building solutions with the Sehgal Foundation in India?
Yes, sure. I joined Sehgal Foundation about 22 years back, and that time we were very naive. We work only in rural areas, only in villages, across 12 states in India, in over 1,800 villages. So we thought, one of the main problems of India is population. And agriculture, of course, we thought, to increase the productivity. So we went to the community. And when we went, they were all women, especially women, and they came to us. I remember one lady coming up to me and telling me, no, please don't talk about population. We have no water. I have the skin problem and I haven't taken bath in 10 days. There is no water available in my village. So please do something about water. So, all right. So we thought, okay, we have to work on this issue. Then we gradually, when we expanded in our scope, we went to many villages. In some villages, the girl literacy level was as low as 2%. So we wanted to mobilize adolescent girls on issues on population, but they wanted education. They had no platform to educate themselves. So that was many years ago. Of course, things have changed now with the right to education has come into effect, and there is a considerable focus on increasing enrollment and retention. But still, there is a large gap. So, so our solutions are based on communities, so it's because this session is about community-driven initiatives. So whatever we have worked on is based on the needs of the communities, the interests of the communities, and matching it all through the issue of food security. So we then designed our integrated village development approach, where we work on 4 major programs. Agriculture development is one, of course, which directly impacts food security. And, we have done a lot of work to increase the income of the farmers and reduce the input cost, so that the productivity increases in terms of India is also going through a mechanization now, a lot of focus on how to use farm implements to increase productivity, and then work with women farmers and soil health, those things we have talked about. So agriculture is there, but very closely associated with agriculture is water. What Jedidah is also talking about, the drought situation in Kenya. Yeah, so water in India is completely, again, the groundwater level is depleting. So a lot of work needs to be done to recharge the groundwater, as well as make available safe drinking water for drinking. So we are doing a lot of work in harvesting water so that it is made available both for drinking and for irrigation. And then, what happens then, once the water is available, then the farmers, they move on to water intensive agriculture. So that also has to be then what Irene was saying. It's a continuous education to talk about agriculture, water. They are very closely interlinked. So we cannot do away one without the other. So water management, to address water security. Then the third program on education, because that was the need. And we work only in government schools, government public schools, where, you know, the wash facilities, especially for girls, are very inadequate. So providing wash facilities and providing a environment of dignity for, young girls and boys, so that they feel excited to come to school. You know, in the urban schools, of course, the conditions are very different. There are so many amenities. Everyone is going digital and it's beautiful. But rural areas, though, the infrastructure is very outdated. You know, there are, there is no facility of water, toilet. So we provide those facilities and digital literacy. Now, digital literacy for young boys and girls is again addressed to food security. In this digital literacy, we again provide them information about various government programs. I talked about public distribution system, integrated child development, all the Food Security Act programs under the government of India. And these young children are great messengers of change. You know, they go back to their parents. If you give them information about some particular entitlement, they will go back to their parents and tell them. And there have been cases when the families have then gone back to the government shops and they have asked for their entitlements, they asked for the programs, you know. So that is very exciting, how these young boys and girls become the change agent. And I think now is the right time to, really mold their mind to the concept of food security and climate change mitigation and adaptation. These classes are also taught to these young girls and boys. And the fourth program is called LPS, Local Participation and Sustainability. That is completely on sustainability and impact. Just like what Irene mentioned, of course, all the villages, they feel very isolated. When they are isolated, they do not have a bargaining power, even women. So bringing these people as collectives, as women collectives, as women leadership schools, we have village leadership schools, we have village development committees, so that, they all come together and call for collective action and make other programs sustainable. And they are again mobilized in the right from the beginning, from planning, implementation, assessing impact, and then advocacy. It has to be a complete loop. And nutrition is again a very integral part of it, because as I said, women and adolescent girls, the problem of anemia is there, and there are health committees at the village level. So we work with those mandatory committees at the village level and make them functional, because there are many members in these committees, but they themselves do not know that they are the members of these communities. So making them functional, explaining them about their responsibilities, about their rights, and also about how they can avail the government programs. Programs are very nice. So we try to bridge the information gap between what is available and how it can be accessed to the communities. So in terms of whole mobilization and empowerment. So these are the four diverse programs: water, agriculture, education, and local participation and sustainability. But they all are interconnected to food security and the overall well-being of communities.
Thank you so much. And I really see how what you were talking about before, about how there are programs and systems in place, but people don't know about them and people don't know how to access them, is so tied into this issue of education, and especially women's education. So that I love that story of the kids then helping their parents when they're able to get the education to access those services. So it wouldn't have been immediately obvious to me how children's education was directly tied to food security, but it's very clear. Thank you for helping us to understand that.
Thank you.
Jedidah, I'd like to ask you, World Vision is a leader in regenerative agriculture, and I've been so inspired by many different World Vision programs that I've had the opportunity to visit and see over the years. Can you tell us more about this and its potential to promote food security? And also, I'm going to add in a question from the panelists that I hope you can address, which is, how can pastoralists be supported to cope with the droughts and climate change? So maybe I can invite you to talk about regenerative agriculture, but also what can be done to support pastoralists?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Robin. And I really appreciate that question. I'll be tackling it as I finish up. Just as a way of explaining about the regenerative agriculture, I think regenerative agriculture is a conservation and also a rehabilitation approach towards food and farming systems. And this approach basically focuses on topsoil regeneration. It also looks at decreasing biodiversity, improving the water cycle, and also enhancing ecosystem services, and of course, supporting biosequestration, increasing resilience to climate change, and also strengthening the health and the vitality of the farm soil. And this approach is actually not a specific practice by itself, as you have mentioned the several things that it entails. And basically, it uses variety of sustainable agricultural activities and techniques all together in a combination. And this would include things like farm waste management, and also including external sources to enhance the farm. And basically, within the small-scale farms and gardens, it is actually around permaculture, agroecology, bringing on board agroforestry aspects, restoration ecology, and also an holistic management of the entire farm. And basically, when you go to the large-scale farmers, they talk about techniques such as no-till and also reducing on the tillage practices. So when we come to the question around how regenerative agriculture has the potential to promote food security, I think one of the things we have to appreciate is that the traditional approaches to increasing yields in agriculture basically relies on enhancing gains in terms of refining the existing processes, making more efficient use of the capital, and also maybe improving use of the inputs that are required for production work to take place in an efficient manner, and also go into using of bigger and better machineries to enhance production. And this diverts from this traditional agriculture methodology, as now regenerative agriculture now starts looking at improving the soil health and looking at the inputs that are required so that they decrease, because when you reduce on when you improve on the soil fertility, for example, you reduce on the use of the fertilizers, and then increasing crop yield will come, gradually, even as we continue experiencing the extreme weather conditions, because the soil just gets healthy by itself, and it can also be able to regenerate. And in most plants, you realize that most people look at mitigating climate change. Those people who look at this, they actually focus on reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. And regenerative agriculture basically is one of the ways that we capture atmospheric carbon dioxide by growing more plants. And this makes sure that more carbon dioxide moves into the soil. And this is pretty nearly the only currently functioning technology available for drawing greenhouse gases down. And so basically through cultivation and also nurturing of forests and permanent perennial pastures and also grasslands. And so because of the enhanced soil health, the improvement within the production systems, we are able to realize sustainability because of the soil health improvement. And we cannot match this with the traditional farming technologies. And so we realize that the farm profits become higher, and also the input production costs like fertilizers go low, because it is a self-regenerating production system. And so, as you've mentioned, World Vision, we are highly promoting the regenerative agriculture. It is one of our key sustainable agriculture practices, and we have several approaches and models and methodologies that we use to promote, because as you've heard, it's a combination of several things that have to work together to give a result. And one of the things that we are doing is a model that we call farmer managed natural regeneration. And this is an effective and also a low-cost scalable approach to land restoration. And basically, the farmers allow the farms to regenerate by themselves. There are simple practices that the farmers are able to work within their farms to allow natural regeneration to take place. And this has actually already realized a lot of results. Specifically in Kenya, in the last year 2021, we realized over 18,000 hectares rehabilitated through this kind of a methodology. And also this year, we just finalized writing our annual report for 22. We have already registered 72,000 acres that is that are restored. And this is, it's called a farmer managed. It is the farmer that basically drives managing of their own forest and allowing them to regenerate without necessarily introducing any new seed planting and all that. We have what we call climate change mitigation aspects. And for this, we have regreening communities project model. And this model actually is very interesting, which works together with the farmer managed natural regeneration model. And it looks at agriculture, bringing on board agriculture, pastoral, communal, and also forest lands. And you realize that when environmental functionality is restored, then the enabling policies and sustainable livelihoods are also realized. You realize that you realize improved access to natural resource. And as I said, the majority of the areas that we work in are in ASAL areas. So this is where we are implementing this kind of a model where the community comes together and have an holistic approach to their land management and restoration, and coming up with more sequential and logical intervention that will ensure them managing their own resources as a community. We have climate smart agriculture, of course, and I think a majority of the people are conversant with this. And this is where we promote agroforestry, conservation agriculture, rainwater harvesting, issues around crop diversification, climate information services, of course, erosion control techniques, basically to ensure that farmers' resilience to climate change and also farm productivity is also enhanced. And of course, as we know, climate smart agricultural practices reduce the risks that are faced by majority of the small scale farmers. I think I'd already mentioned earlier that 80% of farmers within Kenya are small scale farmers. So we are trying to promote climate smart production practices so that we can enhance their production and make sure that there is full sustainability, there is reliability, of course, within their the production work, and also ensuring that they are resilient and they're able to adapt to the climatic changes that are also happening. And of course, you see that they also contributing towards greenhouse emission and carbon sequestration. Currently in World Vision Kenya, we are in the process of engaging small-scale farmers to see how we can involve them into carbon programming, where they are signing up to contribute towards carbon sequestration within the projects that we are working with. And second last, we have what we call integrated water management. And this is a sustainable approach where we address socioeconomic needs of every stakeholder within a watershed. And basically, they're involved in terms of preserving the environment and, of course, considering their future needs for the generation. So they come up with plans on how they are going to manage their watershed, and then they develop these plans and implement them to ensure that they are able to collectively use the resources that are within the watershed and make sure that they are able to continue managing pollution within the areas and all those other aspects around the water management. And of course, we are also working very strongly on climate change mitigation through energy efficiency, promoting clean fuel use, energy cookstoves, and the clean energy sources, so that we are able to enhance the ability of fuel use. And so we have all this, including waste management, that we work together within a community, which now rounds it up to give a very beautiful effect and impact that generally leads to improved soils, improved environments, improved yields, and also enhanced crop food security. In the last 2 years, World Vision Kenya, actually globally, we have 11,000 projects that are implementing these things that I've just talked about, and they are targeting 15 million people across 47 countries. And 27 of these projects are actually based here in Kenya. And the last 2 years, we were able to do some analysis to see what is happening, what is the kind of change that is happening. And we took a survey that was comparing the results for our work for the last 5 years. And one of the things that really stood out is that there is a big number of populations that we are working in who are actually now adopting this kind of agriculture. And we were able to record a 59% increment from 22.6 5 years before. And actually this has translated to 78% proportion of people within the communities we are working with who are saying we can now provide for our children without assistance, up from a population of 59% 5 years ago. So you can already see that there is a lot of evidence in terms of and correlation between adoption of this regreening approach and correlation between food security within households. And of course, we have a high population that is also now increasingly uptaking clean fuel and technologies, standing at 64%. We are pushing it and hoping that in the next 5 years, because we are in a new strategy period, we'll hit 100%. Going to the question that was asked by the participant, I really appreciate this question. And in the situation that we are in, we are basically looking at saving lives. That is what is very critical at this point. And the support that is actually urgent is support for food. We have a Kenya working technical group at the national level and also at the various counties that are coordinating this kind of responses. And there are places depending on accessibility to market and foodstuffs where we are taking the actual food supplies. In areas where there is market stabilities, we are opting to give cash and conditional cash transfer so that the households can make decisions and weigh across their urgent needs in the household and try to respond to their needs as at their situation. We are also planning in advance because we are looking forward into getting out of this situation. So as a programmers, we are already working post the emergency phase and looking at aspect around restocking of livestock, because the majority of the affected counties are actually almost 100% pastoralist. And so their livelihoods has already been swept away. There is a lot of helplessness. And so as we preposition for post the drought situation, we are looking at coming up with the restocking aspects, supporting communities to come up with economic activities that they can be able to engage in, and basically addressing the malnutrition aspects, because we're already at a very critical level. Currently, malnutrition management is also one of the things that we are responding in to make sure that those that are acutely malnourished are getting support, and working very close with the government to provide the supplements that are required to sustain the livelihoods. We are also currently working with different partners to do water tracking, because apart from the livestock need, these people need urgent water for just drinking. So we are doing a lot of urgent response in terms of water tracking to these areas to make sure that they have water to keep them afloat. So basically, that's what we are doing. And we are hoping and praying that we'll get out of this situation as soon as we can, so that people can continue enjoying their life. World Vision stands for fullness of life for every child. we live for every child to make sure that they enjoy life in its fullness. So we are praying that we'll get out of this situation as soon as possible so that children can enjoy life in its fullness. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I really love both how you were able to walk us through the technical aspects of regenerative agriculture and what it means in the context of the communities you're working in, but also how it ties into this landscape level environmental management and land use planning that needs to happen. I think also it's been quite interesting to hear from all of you about how your programs both meet the individuals where they are, but also help the communities to come together for empowerment. And also just respond to the urgent situations as well. That's a lot of things to juggle all together. To finish up our panel, we have about 15 minutes left. I wonder if you could each just take a few moments to talk about what do you think is most needed to accelerate food security in your region in the world? What is the most urgent need that if we were all to come together and try to address that we should focus on? Irene, I'd like to invite you to respond to that.
Yeah, thank you. What I think is most needed is a balance, creating a balance within the food systems chain. When you look at Uganda, we've tended to over-concentrate on production. And so as the population, as the community is actually getting so much overwhelmed by the quantity of food that is available for those that are actually able to produce, the issues of processing, value addition, and ensuring that, the infrastructure is well developed to ensure equitable distribution across the different regions of plenty and, moving to areas of less plenty, and then also looking at the utilization issue. So we need to focus so much on trying to balance the food systems chain to ensure that as we are investing a lot of resources in production, ensuring that communities are able to produce, but also we need to invest in the other levels, the other areas. We need to engage more with the private sector because currently farming has been so much looked at as, just produce for food, but we also need to bring in the business aspect because that is the only way that we're going to ensure that actually food moves, that food gets processed. So we are beginning to realize the importance of the private sector, even as development partners who are working as non-profits. We are beginning to realize the importance of working and engaging with the private sector to be able to solve the agriculture challenges that our countries are facing. And then for our case in Uganda, we actually already, at the government, is already prioritizing the youth issue. Because when you look, just as my colleagues already mentioned, when you look at the labor force within the agriculture sector is mainly dominated by the older population, majorly the ladies. There's so much into their production, the mothers, the elderly women, and we have a bulging youth population. Uganda is actually the second youngest nation in the world. And with all these vibrant, energetic youth, many of them are not interested in agriculture. And the reasons why they're not interested in agriculture, we've also not tried to make it attractive. We are still packaging agriculture in the traditional ways. The face of agriculture is that old woman, miserable woman in the village holding a hoe. So no youth would want to associate themselves with this image of this elderly woman. So we need to find ways of engaging youth and making agriculture actually more attractive to the youth because many of them are unemployed. They have the energy and they're willing, and probably maybe we may not have to engage them at the production level, but now we have an opportunity of bringing the youth at the other levels because probably this is where they're most interested. They want quick gains, they want things that actually move and they can engage their creativity. And then of course, we also now bring in the issue of the technology. Many of the youth now want, new things, innovation, they want to create. And so if we are to create that platform, that space where they can be able to innovate, bring in ideas, and we welcome them because sometimes we also tend to be a little bit rigid, thinking, you don't know, we are going to teach you. But probably what the elder generation used to do may not be kind of so relevant in the current situation. So we have that opportunity to bring in different players within the agriculture sector, empower them, recognize them, create the space for them to be able to also innovate and provide the necessary tools and resources they need to be able to sort of kind of become active players. So I believe that if we are to open up this space and do this, we shall be able to address some of the most pressing challenges now facing the food security system or food security issue in the country and the world over. Thank you.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. And, you know, this issue of engaging the private sector is one that I've worked on extensively. And I think that there's so much that the private sector needs to do to partner with local communities on food security, making sure that when they're encouraging planting of commodities, it's not at the expense of food, and doing that investment in the value add supply chains is so critical as well. So I really resonated with what you were talking about. Anjali, in your context, what do you think is most needed to accelerate food security in India and the communities where you're working?
So I really resonate with Irene about the partnership. So my first point is on PPP, public-private partnership and people. You know, and in India, we have a corporate social responsibility law in place. So where every corporates contributes to the social welfare. So that has started a few years back, and still it's in a nascent state, and there is a scope to expand it. So public, private and people partnership, that is the key to take it forward. And we are talking about co-creation these days. We are talking about SDG 17, you know, so that is the way to go in the coming years. Another point related to partnership is on farmer producer organizations. You know, what Irene was mentioning in India, what we do is this farmers, they come collectively and they run their companies like agricultural companies on profit basis. So they have more bargaining power in terms of purchase of inputs, in terms of selling their output. So FPOs again is I think it is a long way, and it will gain momentum over the years. Then third is, of course, climate smart agriculture. We've already talked about you know, ways to increase productivity. But added to this is digital agriculture. You know, agriculture also is going through a digitization phase. So where, you know, the farmers, of course, literacy is related to digitization. So education and agriculture in that sense go hand in hand. So digital agriculture has a lot of potential, I think, to address some of the farmers. And then, of course, focus on nutrition variety, especially in India. As I said, the varieties in nutrition, for example, iron-rich wheat or millets, vitamin-rich golden rice, all those, and nutrition gardens. You know, what we have also propagated in India is these backyard kitchen gardens where the women, you know, they have this package of basket of vegetables and nutrition kits for their families. So that can go a long way in addressing their nutritional requirements. And we also need to diversify to more allied services. In India, most of the families have cattle, a cow or a water buffalo, you know. So of course, expanding our scope to livestock management to increase the productivity, that is very important. And the last point I would like to mention is about information again. You know, I think that is the gap which we really need to fill, and we can only do it together. You know, that is the tagline for our foundation. Together, we empower rural communities, you know. So it can only be done if we come together and make a difference in the positive difference in the lives of the communities in India and world over. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And, you know, I just see how all of the topics that you're both raising, all of you are raising, are coming together, because this question of aging farmers is one that I think exists around the world. It exists here in the US as well as in so many other countries. And getting youth excited about bringing new technology, access, you know, helping to use the digital marketplace of information to make decisions and to try new techniques like regenerative agriculture, I think are ways that we can really engage the next generation and sort of make farming cool again, right? So it's great to hear how you guys are doing that. Jedidah, I would like to very much hear from you. Where do you think we need to focus efforts with in Kenya to address food security?
Thank you very much, Robin. And I want to agree with my my friends, Irene and Anjali, that there is a lot in common. I think we sound like we are neighbors in terms of most of these issues. But allow me to start by saying that one of the things that I think Kenya needs to really look at very fast is to address the food supply chain. Make sure that where there is production, it's facilitated to address the demand where there is a surplus, and of course working around developing the existing production systems, and around that working with farmers just to enhance technology within the production space, make sure that the right information reach the farmers at the right time, and that the farmers are well equipped to adapt to the changing drought situation and make sure that they are able to collectively produce and meet the food security need. The next thing I'll talk about is around the food environment space. And here I'm talking about the linkages, market linkages, value chain, value addition in terms of the production of the input, and make sure that there is linkage between the markets, which mostly exist within the towns in those very far to reach areas, and the production areas where food production is actually taking place, and basically make sure that there are enhanced systems that are already put in place. I think Anjali has already talked about organizing farmers into cooperatives. I think I talked about farmers in small scale in Kenya. So working around formalizing the organization of the farmers into farmer groups, into cooperatives that are able to better aggregate their produce, better produce together, and better take their products into other areas, which also enhances the economic capacity in the process. One of the things I didn't mention is that we also have issues around consumer behaviors in terms of preferences to certain foods. And in Kenya, we have already what we call drought-resistant foods, like sorghum, for example. Kenyans would prefer ugali. Ugali is our main meal. They would prefer one of the main staple foods, actually. So they would prefer ugali made from maize, unlike ugali made from sorghum. And yet sorghum is able to well adapt to the changing climatic conditions. And so these kind of consumer behaviors need to be really addressed to make sure that farmers have the ability to appreciate food that is really available in this kind of situation. And of course, looking at the purchasing power, I already talked about the inflation rates, basically empowering people within the communities and within Kenya to have the purchasing power. And basically, this looks at availing more economic opportunities to make sure that food availability is there. It's not just about you being able to produce, but it's you being able to have the capacity, the ability to access the food. And so if there are more economic opportunities, and especially looking at non-crop and livestock value chains within these ASAL areas. We have piloted some of the projects where we are doing very well with pasture production value chains, for example. We are doing gums and raisins, aloe vera, which are normally naturally occurring plants within these areas, just to diversify into beadwork and all those other non-agriculture related sources of income to be able to provide money for the communities to be able to get food on their table. And as I finish, I think the issue about youth engagement in agriculture has already been talked by my colleagues, and it is time. I think you already mentioned in previously that we need to entice youth into agriculture. And I think one of the key things that would do this is innovative techniques and technologies that would not make the youth labor too much, and also ensure that they engage in production processes that earn them quick cash. I think one of the key challenges I've found with youth as I work with is they are very impatient. They will not have the patience to wait for a mango tree to take 15 years to start getting mangoes, but they can have a quick turnaround agricultural engagements, and of course looking at exactly at where within the value chain where they can be involved, so that they are also bringing their contribution as well. And of course, the aspect about enhancing input access, I already talked about that as one of the challenges. And actually in Kenya, you realize that producing vegetables, for example, is more expensive if you use inputs bought in Kenya. And so most of the vegetables that we consume come from our neighboring countries in Tanzania, in Uganda, and it is cheaper to bring them from those places than to produce and sell in Kenya. So basically the government of Kenya to look at how to subsidize and the inputs and provide subsidies in terms of seed and fertilizers, and also create opportunities for finances, opportunities for the farmers to be able to produce and break even and get some money out of the production, so that there is continuous production that is going on. And
thank you so much. I hate to
thank you so much.
Ask you to finish, but I realize we're coming at the end. So I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much. I feel like coming out of this, I have a much clearer, crystallized vision of what's happening with regard to food issues, and also some real inspiration as I listen to each of you. And I think a lot of opportunities to partner on solutions. You guys have outlined that so well. So thank you so much. It was such an honor to get to have this conversation with you today. And I wish you a wonderful afternoon to all of our participants listening as well.